Hey guys, what's going on? I am here with my buddy Mustafa Speaks. So we are back for our redo, or basically our round two here of the "Is Muhammad a True Prophet?" Debate. So just real quick rundown: we're gonna have 10-minute opening statements, two rebuttal periods, 5 minutes apiece. We'll open it up to audience Q&A, and then we will have 5 minute closing statements. And so as we get close to the time, just hit at me so that we can kind of see what your questions are for the audience Q&A thing, and then that'll be that. So since Mustafa is in the affirmative side, he is going to go first with his opening statement. So whenever you start, sir, I will start my timer.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the most gracious and most merciful. Before I begin, just want to mention that I have a stutter or speech impediment. So if I tend to stumble on some words or tend to take long pauses, it's because I am stuttering. So just to let you guys know that, so you are aware of that. So with that being said, the topic of of um of today. I think it's a very crucial. I think it's a very good topic, and I think it's a topic that's not debated a lot, which is Muhammad a true prophet from God? So I'm happy to be debating this topic. So the fact that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the final prophet of God. Like all other prophets, his mission was to preach one God and to um, and to emphasize God. Um, and the Quran was revealed to him um, and was well preserved. The Prophet Muhammad lived in the full light of history because his followers well preserved um, well preserved the full details of his life and teachings. Muslims, we believe that Muhammad was a man chosen by God and not in any divine way. The continuous communication between the Prophet Muhammad and God was the core of his life. He started his day and he ended it with exalting God's praises. The five um, prayers were the most profound worship in his life. They were spiritual stations that comforted him and renewed and enhanced his strength. He used to say to Bilal, who used to give the call for prayers, or the azan, as we say in Islam, Bilal, give us the of prayer. He also used to pray in a privacy at home in the depth of the night throughout his life. This devotion and love of God are one of the proofs of his prophethood, which could have never been made by an impostor. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught Muslims decency, integrity, sensitivity, self-restraint, patience, forgiveness, and respect for one another. He taught his followers to do their work perfectly until the last moment of life. Also, he taught Muslims to love others as they love themselves. He taught us humility, nobility, purity, decency, austerity, refinement, and devotion. No man ever in history has been so beloved and followed in all aspects of his life like the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. More than 1.6 billion Muslims from all over the globe love, adore, and follow the Prophet Muhammad. He is present in their thoughts and alive in their hearts. So Prophet Muhammad was a very influential man during his life with 23 years of his lifespan working for God only. And even when the prophet was asked to stop his preaching, when the pagans they offered of the prophet money, they offered him They offered him leadership, and they offered him um uh, um 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 um, females. But the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, since his mission was from God, he rejected all of these things, and he said, "Rather you put the moon in my left hand, or and the sun in my right hand, I will not give up my mission or my message, which is from God." So the Prophet Muhammad SAW was doing all his works from God, not for himself, and he did not make things up. Um, and 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 um um and um I believe this, as well as all the other Muslims. So with that being said, I would like to hear your cases against the prophet, against his prophethood, and I would love to answer each one of them. So with that being said, I'll hand the mic over to you.
All right, thank you, sir. So you go fast. That was only 5 minutes, so good job. I will take up the full 10 minutes. I am pretty sure. So I'll start my timer here, and we'll get going. So, Muhammad is the most obvious false prophet of all times. I say that because he made false scientific claims, false historical claims. He behaved in morally reprehensible ways. He commanded morally reprehensible things. He directly contradicts the books that he claimed to be aligned with. He encountered a false spirit, and he even came from a fictional place. Now, there are plenty of scientific errors, but I chose 9 to cover today. So in Quran 65:12, it says that Allah has created 7 heavens and the same number of earths. Ibn Kathir admits the same thing in his tafsir when he says that Allah created 7 earths. Kathir also cites Sahih Bukhari in his reference by quoting this: "He will sink down to 7 earths." There are clearly not 7 earths. Quran 34:9 says Allah could cause the sky to fall upon people. Okay, Chicken Little, that's obviously not true. Sahih Bukhari records a human being is put together in his mother's womb for 40 days, and then he becomes a clot of thick blood for a similar period of time. Embryology says that is ridiculous. Sahih Bukhari records that a gender is selected for an embryo sometime after the embryo is formed. That is false. Quran 36:36 and 51:49 say that all organisms are created in pairs. That is verifiably false. Some animals, lots of animals, such as starfish, can reproduce by fission, which basically just means they split in two and then survive independently. Quran 16:66 says that milk is pure and agreeable to those who drink it. I drink it. It does not agree with me. I am lactose intolerant. Quran 25:53 says that there is a barrier between fresh and salt water that is a partition forbidden to pass. No, that's called diffusion. It passes eventually. Quran 6:38 says that all animals live in communities. There are several animals that don't live in communities, such as skunks, red pandas, and duckbill platypus. Quran 16:79 says that Allah himself holds up the birds. That's just kind of funny to me. There are quite a few historical errors, but one major false claim that Muhammad makes, and this claim is around Jesus and his crucifixion. All the biblical authors report that Jesus was killed by crucifixion. Jesus himself prophesied that he would be killed by crucifixion. The Old Testament lays claim that the Messiah will suffer and die. Besides the biblical authors, there are about a dozen other authors from within the first century that make the same claim about Jesus' death. They all say he was killed by crucifixion. The most famous two are Josephus and Tacitus. The Muslims' favorite New Testament scholar, Bart Ehrman, even claims that the most well-known fact about the historical Jesus is that he was killed by crucifixion under the Roman precept Pontius Pilate. Two bonus false claims by Muhammad. Quran 9:30 seems to think that the Jews took Ezra to be the son of God. There is zero evidence this ever happened. Quran 12:41 and 21:71 thinks that the Egyptians invented crucifixion. That's dead wrong. The Persians did in 519 BC, about 1,000 years after supposedly the Egyptians did so. Muhammad is a morally disgusting person. I will give 4 examples. Now, just because someone is morally sinful does not necessarily make them a false prophet. There are plenty of prophets in the Bible who did very major sins, and that does not disqualify them for being a prophet. But what disqualifies Muhammad specifically for this is the fact that he claims that he never sinned, he was perfect, and that he is quote unquote the best example for mankind. So Muhammad married a 6-year-old girl and had sex with her while she was still immature enough to be playing with dolls at the age of 9. Muhammad was caught sleeping with Mary the Copt, a slave of his, by one of his wives in her bed. While the wives confronted him, he promised them that he wouldn't do it again until Allah revealed something to him and said, "Why do you forbid what I have made lawful to you?" Right? So Muhammad married her and kept sleeping with her. So this makes Muhammad a fornicator, a liar, and an adulterer. Muhammad once saw his adopted son's wife scantily clothed, and apparently her sexiness made his heart leap. Upon hearing about this, his son offered to divorce her so that Muhammad could marry her. Muhammad forbade it until he received another revelation which said that he could. Oh, and by the way, then he forbid adoption. He made legal for you to marry your adopted children's ex-spouse for future generations of Muslims that can't actually adopt anyone. Muhammad revealed a rule that said if a man could treat his wives equally, that they could marry up to 4 women at once. Muhammad broke this rule by marrying 9 women at once, and then he quit sleeping with one of them, not treating her very fairly, because she was apparently too old for his liking. So instead, he slept with his child bride on 2 nights instead of one. So once her night, on her own night, and then once on his wife that he quit sleeping with night. Muhammad commanded morally disgusting things. Muhammad said that adultery is forbidden except if the woman was married to someone else and that woman was a slave or a captive. That's adultery. Muhammad said it was okay for a wife to be beaten if her husband feared her disobedience. That's domestic abuse. Muhammad allowed for prepubescent sex with minors. In Quran 65:4, when divorcing a wife, a man must wait 3 months to make sure that she is not pregnant. This included women who no longer menstruated, right? So menopause, and women who had not menstruated, aka girls who were too young to menstruate. According to the Quran, Muhammad came to confirm the scriptures that were sent down before him, which was the Torah, the Psalms, the Gospels. And since Muhammad is supposedly continuing the biblical message, we ought to see what the definition of a biblical prophet is according to that criteria. A true prophet must follow God and the God of the Bible, called Yahweh, Ego Ami, or Kyrios. Allah is the name of the God in the Quran, not any of those names. Not only those names, but the 99 names of Allah, none of them is he known by. So immediately this makes Muhammad a false prophet. The earliest biographies of Muhammad of Ibn Ishaq, al-Waqidi, and Tafsir al-Tabari report that Muhammad received revelation telling his followers and the pagans to bow down to Allat and Al-Uzza, only to find out later that Satan was the one who revealed it. Apparently, Satan met the Quran's challenge of producing a surah like it, since Muhammad didn't know the difference. A true prophet must not follow deception. As mentioned above, Muhammad was tricked by Satan into polytheism, but it gets worse. In Quran 4:157, it says that Jesus was not killed nor crucified. I already covered this. And then it says that Allah, or it paints Allah to be the best of deceivers. A true prophet must not follow the teachings of a demon. If it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, sounds like a duck, it's probably a duck. So Muhammad's first revelation came as a result of an unnamed and unannounced spirit being who attacked him physically and assaulted Muhammad in a cave. After the event was over, Muhammad ran down a mountain, terrified, to his wife, and said, cover me, I fear something terrible might happen." Later, the creature who physically assaulted Muhammad was called Gabriel. But as we read about all the encounters with Gabriel in the Bible, we see that Gabriel is a kind and gentle spirit, never harming anyone. And if someone was afraid of them, he offered them comfort. Gabriel offered him no comfort. A true prophet does not deny the Son. Not only does the Quran say in multiple locations that Allah has no son, it also repeats that Allah is a father to no one. So Muhammad fails as a prophet outright. Muhammad fits the biblical profile as a false prophet that Jesus warns about in Matthew 24:11. He says, "There will arise many false prophets who will deceive many." Matthew 17 or 7:15 says, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves." 1 Timothy 4:1 says, "Some will depart from the faith by devoting themselves to deceitful spirits," Gabriel, and the teachings of demons. 1 John 4:1 says, "Do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone into the world." And the criteria for figuring out if someone is a false prophet is the one who denies the Father and the Son is an antichrist. No one who denies the Son can have the Father. He who confesses the Son has the Father as well. In 2 Corinthians, Paul says, "For if the one comes and proclaims another Jesus who we have not proclaimed, or you receive a different spirit who you did not receive, you have put up with it well enough." Muhammad proclaimed a different Jesus. Muhammad proclaimed a different gospel. Muhammad proclaimed a different spirit. Muhammad failed to meet the biblical criteria of a true prophet, right? So he made false scientific claims. He made false historical claims. He behaved morally terribly. He commanded more morally awful behavior. He directly contradicts the books that he says he's in line with. He encountered a false spirit. And by the way, he came from a town called Mecca that never existed when he was there. So your 5 minutes. Let me reset the time here, buddy. Whenever you are ready.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all your cases. I'll begin. So the first thing you mentioned about science. I don't use science to justify religion because 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 I don't believe that science can prove God, and also it's very dumb for because it's dumb because science is supposed to agree with God, not God not God has to agree with science. So I actually don't have that method. Okay, but as regard to some stuff that you mentioned, uh, the first thing that Quran says that there are seven heavens and seven earths. Scholars have explained this that the seven earths mentioned in Quran are the seven layers of earth, of the seven layers that are in the earth. That is what is meant by the seven earths, and scholars have explained that. Now, the next thing you mentioned was the um 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 was the crucifixion of Jesus. Now, as Quran says in Quran chapter 4 verses 157, that the Jews did not kill him, but rather it appeared to them that Jesus had been killed. So God made it appear to the people that Jesus had been killed, and this is even something the God of the Bible would do as well. Um, this is even something that the God of the Bible would do as well in Second Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 11. It says, "For this reason, God sends them a powerful delusion so that they will believe a lie. So this is what is taught in the Bible as well. Now, to go into more depth on the crucifixion, there were early Christians and early Christian sect, and you might call them heretics, but these were an early Christian sects called the called called the Basildelians, and they were an early Christian sect who did not um who did not hold the view that Jesus had been killed. Rather, they had um rather they held the view that Jesus was raised into heaven by God without death. And these were an early Christian sect. Now to go more, now you also mentioned that the Quran says that the Pharaoh or the Egypt had crucifixion. If you read the verse, it says that Pharaoh said, I will crucify you on the trunk of palm trees. So these were trees for crucifixion or stakes. And also there was a pharaoh known as the Pharaoh of Stakes, and he used to put people or um 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 on the stakes, and this is proven. So in Quran it doesn't say that a cross or any of that. No, it says a tree or a stake, and there was a pharaoh who was known for that. Now the next point you brought up was the prophet's marriage to Aisha. The prophet married Aisha when she the prophet married Aisha.
Go ahead and finish your thought, buddy.
Uh, the prophet married Aisha when she reached the age of puberty. And this is proven when Aisha was 9 years old. Um, now, but since you have a problem with this, then nowhere in the Bible does it mention the age of marriage. In fact, of the Bible, God he allowed um children, girls, to be married, and this is in Numbers 31, um where it reads. Let me open up the verse. Numbers
Verse
31.
17.
Yep, correct. Verse 17. Now kill all the boys and kill every woman who has slept with a man, but save for yourselves every girl who has never slept with a man. Now these are captives of war. If you go to Deuteronomy chapter 21, it speaks that during captives of war, it says that it says it says that they must be married, and if you find if and and if you find no delight in her, then you are to let her go as she pleases, since you have since you have.
Humiliated her, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
I know that argument. Thank you. All right, so I will reset my time and I will address a couple of the things that you brought up. So, in your opening statement, you had mentioned that Muhammad taught pure monotheism, and that, let's be honest, a lot of false prophets have taught monotheism. Let me take a look at my note here. So, if we're going to read in the book of James, it says that Satan believes in one God, or the demons believe in one God and shudder. Right, so that has nothing to do with their or not they are a true prophet. I'll be curious to hear you in your rebuttal period. Tell me where Muhammad said to love others as they love themselves. It may be true. I just have never read that before. You mentioned that they offered Muhammad money and said that, oh, you'll get leadership and you get all these types of things, and he rejected it. Well, he got all of those things on his own, so I don't feel like that is a good reason to believe that he is a prophet. One thing that I'm going to spend a little bit of time on is science does actually justify some degree of religion. If a book makes a scientific claim and that scientific claim is verifiable or falsifiable, I gave you 9 examples of how the Quran and the Hadith are dead wrong. You mentioned that the Earth has 7 layers. I am looking at an educational website. It has 3 layers, not 7 layers. There are not 7 Earths. There are not even 7 layers of the Earth. There are 3. So there are. It's just ridiculous to say that if a prophet proclaims that there's something scientifically true, and then it turns out that it's scientifically false, you have to live in the real world. You cannot sit there and try to tell any of us that that's a reality. Um, let's see here. Early Christians. I need to read my notes here. Okay, so crucified. Crucified does not have to be on a cross. Crucifixion was invented by the Persians. That's a fact. You mentioned that there was a pharaoh known as the Pharaoh of the Stake or something like that. If you could provide some sort of reference for that, I'd be very interested in looking that up. And then you would need to justify why all of the historians say that crucifixion was invented by the Persians, and none of them say that crucifixion was invented by the Egyptians. Aisha was in puberty. No, you're not allowed to play with dolls after the age of puberty. She was 9 years old. She was 9 years old, still playing with dolls. And even for the sake of argument, we can grant that she was 9 years old. Is that the best example of mankind? Is Muhammad marrying a 6 year old? If you have a sibling who is 6 years old or 9 years old, do you want to look at them and go, hey, you're ready for marriage to a 50-year-old man, and then you are ready for sexual intercourse at the age of 9? That is preposterous. That is disgusting. There is no other way around it, especially if it's supposedly the best example of mankind who's doing this. Now, you tried to attack the Bible, Numbers 31. I have an entire video about this. So, pretty much everything you said about Numbers 31 is completely false. Um, so you cannot rape women in the Bible. If you rape a woman in the Bible, you are to be put to death. Um, and in Numbers 31, they shave their head. They have a waiting period. And you are not allowed to sell them into slavery. These women came into their willfully. These women, or not willfully necessarily, but the women willfully went into a marriage contract with the man. It makes it very clear on that sense. I don't think you really had any other points that I can recall. So I will yield the rest of my time and let you address me in your second rebuttal.
Okay, thank you. Okay, going back to your first point on science, I don't do science because, as I said, I don't believe that science can prove God, and as I said, it doesn't make sense. As I said, it doesn't make sense to say that that God must agree with science. That doesn't make any sense because God made science. It would make more sense for science to um it would make more sense for science to agree with God because even science it changes from time and time. So science might say something now, but later on in the future they may discover that they were wrong and they might change something. So that is why I don't. use science to prove Islam or to prove God. Now, but going back to the seven layers of the earth, I can't believe that I can't believe that um I can't believe that you don't know that there are seven layers of earth, and I'll actually name each one for you: the crust, the mantle, the outer core, the inner core, the lithosphere, the asthenosphere, the outer core, and the yeah, that was it. So, yeah, that is the seven layers of the earth, which is a basic fact. Now, going to your next argument, regarding the age of um um regarding the age of Aisha. She had reached the age of puberty when the Prophet had married her. Now, you quoted um something which says that she was playing with dolls. Now, this is actually said by Katabi, and here, let me just read it to you. It was either during the time of Khabar or Tabuk, in which Aisha was 14 years old or more and definitely hit on puberty, and she still had her dolls with her, thus proving Al-Katabi's um Al-Katabi um assertions wrong, that she must have been pre pubescent, and and Ibn Hajar stressed this fact. The commentary in um 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 Ibn Hajar con conclusively proves that Al-Katabi was wrong, and that and that possessions of dolls does not prove that Aisha had not reached the age of puberty. So there's that. Now, now regarding the other points that you brought up, which is the satanic verses. Now, the satanic verses is mentioned in Al-Tabari and Ibn Ishaq, but Al-Tabari is not a hadith book. Al-Tabari is a sourcing book. If you read the introduction to his book, he says it contains weak, authentic, and false hadith with chain narrations for sourcing purposes only. The satanic verses is rejected by all scholars, particularly in the tafsir of Ibn Kathir, where he mentions it is false because this comes from a mursal chain narration, which means that the chain narration is connected. So there is no proof that this goes back to the Prophet. But since you quoted Paul, uh, but since you quoted Paul as a proof, yeah,
All right, go and finish your thought on Paul, but don't go any further than that, please.
okay. But since you quoted Paul as proof, um, Paul himself Paul himself had received Satan. If you read Second Corinthians chapter 14 verses 7. Um, let me just let me just open it.
I can read it.
So
I'll read it to everybody and during my rebuttal period. I know exactly what you're talking about.
okay. Okay, well, okay. So Paul himself says that he was given a messenger from Satan, and that is the same Paul that you quoted.
All right, cool. Thank you. Um, all right. This second round should be pretty fun. So, yes, you said that God made science. So, if God made science, then science should obviously agree with God. There are verifiably false statements here, right? So, I chose specific things that could not possibly be proven to be false, right? So, I'm looking at, in terms of the Earth's crust, I'm literally looking at gsi.ie, right? This is a website that studies geology, and it has three layers. It has the crust, the mantle, and the core. That is three. Now, if you want to start breaking all these things up into different components, you're going to get more than seven. So you just pick and choose whichever one that you would like that fits what the Quran says. But we don't have to go that far with it. We can go further and say, look, okay, whatever. The sky doesn't fall on people. That's not a scientific fact. The sky does not fall on people. There's no way that that could possibly happen, right? Um, a human being is put together in mother's womb for 40 days and becomes a thick clot of blood. At no point, at 0 point in embryology, right? We study this, we see it. It doesn't happen. It's never a clot of blood. When a sperm and an egg combine, it's automatically whatever gender that the sperm has chosen. There's X's and there's Y's. That's exactly how that works. Um, and so it doesn't happen sometime later. That's just a fact. All organisms are not created in pairs. I gave you an example of it. You can look this up yourself. Starfish, for instance, are not created in pairs. And we're talking about organisms anyway. We can start going into bacteria and viruses, which are obviously not created in pairs. That's a false statement. Milk, it's a fact that like 60 some odd percent of humans are lactose intolerant. It's not agreeable. Period. End of story. Um, all animals live in communities. No, they don't. It's just factual that they don't. And these aren't even hadith narrations. I'm talking about the Quran specifically. It does not happen. And Allah himself, let's be honest, does not hold up the birds, right? It's aerodynamics. It's how flight happens. That's why we can fly. Allah does not hold them up, right? So yes, we should do that. Now, you were talking about Aisha and her age and all that kind of stuff. You know what? I disagree with you. I think the Hadith literature makes it very obvious that she was prepubescent, and even if she wasn't prepubescent, it's still wrong. But let's just go with the more disgusting thing, which is Quran 65:4. When I researched 65:4, there are quotes from all of the tafsir scholars that say that someone asked Muhammad, "What about those girls who are too young to menstruate?" And Muhammad replies, they too need a 3-month waiting period. That means that it's okay in Islam for grown men to have sex with women and then divorce them before they have even had their first period. That's disgusting. The satanic verses, there are two chains of narration that are broken. There are three chains that aren't, right? Scholars say that something probably happened. Exactly what happened, they don't know. But why would early Muslims produce this embarrassing piece of information if there was not some truth to it? It seems silly that they would. Paul in Second Corinthians. Let me roll down here, and we're going to read this in context. Where did I put it? Sorry, I'm trying to find my note here. I had a feeling you're going to go with that, so I wrote it down. So this is what Paul says: to keep me from becoming conceited because of the surpassing greatness of revelation, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. 3 times I pled with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest on me. This is a beautiful passage. God gives us things that we need in order to accomplish his tasks, right? It's not about being prideful and arrogant like Islam tends to be like. It is about being humble and following Christ. Um, so if there are anyone in the chat here who would like to ask us some questions, we're going to set aside just about 5 minutes or so to ask questions. So I'll keep an eye on it. I don't know if you
I just
guys. What were you saying, buddy?
no.
Are
I'm
you
not saying.
you gonna say anything? All right, so I'll wait here for a little bit, and then we will. If we don't get a whole lot of questions, we'll just kind of um, move into some statements. Let's see here. Not affect at all. All right, guys. So go ahead and just at me if you do want to ask any questions to myself or ask any questions to Mustafa Speaks. I'll give us about a minute. I'll try to filibuster here and just chit chat and see if any messages come through. If not, we will just move into our closing statements. Not really seeing any questions come in yet. So if they don't, I'm gonna give it about another 20 seconds here or so, buddy, and then we'll get going from here. I would like to thank, just kind of as we're filibustering here, I would like to thank Mustafa Speaks for joining us. I appreciate you, man. Seriously, for having the guts to do this. There is actually a question here. I'm gonna throw it up on the screen. I don't know if you're watching or not, Mustafa, on the thing. I'll read it to you out loud as well. Um, Try to make it a little bit bigger. Can you see this? It takes about 20 seconds, 15 to 20 seconds, um, for the things to pop up. So Sahih Luke asks, um, Q4MS, why, or question for you. Why isn't it double standards that despite Irenaeus and Hippolytus identifying Basilides' belief as heretical, you use him, but Christians wrong to call Ahmadiyans Muslims? Let me try to restate his question. So basically, why are you thinking that the Basilidans or whatever they're called are truer Christians than the earlier Christians?
Okay. Let me just I have this some of my notes. Let me.
Okay, yeah, take your time.
Okay. Uh. Okay. So now critics tend to discredit groups such as them by saying that they are heretics. But but it was actually taught by the churches to lie. Um, for example, in
I don't know if he popped off here for a second. Are you still there, buddy? Looks like he jumped off. I'll answer this really quickly. Hopefully he calls back here in a second. So, um, this heretical group started. Their founder was born in about 130 A.D. Right, we're talking 100 years after the death of Christ. The entire New Testament was completed by around 90 AD, perhaps 100 AD, right within the lifetime of the apostles. This is a Gnostic sect of Christianity. There is almost nothing that Muslims would agree with besides this particular fact. So that's a really good question, Sahih Luke, and thanks for stopping by, man. Let's see here. I would like to know. I'm going to try to call him as I'm answering this question. I would actually like to know um, what the source is for these 7 layers. I've looked into this in the past. There's 3 layers. If you start breaking them down into like micro layers, it ends up being like 9, I think. different layers of the earth. So what ends up happening is the Muslims end up just kind of making things up. I kind of doubt he's going to answer. Let's see some other good questions, and hopefully Mustafa Speaks can answer these in the comments section. He went offline, so I think he was just having another speech issue. Mustafa, about the satanic verses, Quran 22:52 mentioned that Satan threw a verse through Muhammad's speech. So is this daif too? Right, Dyson. I think that's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Um, this is in the Quran, so the hadith are there to exegete or to explain or to contextualize the different Qurans. Like I said, when I was doing research on this, there is a broken chain in two of the hadith narrations, but there are three hadith narrations that do not have a broken chain in this particular spot. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I should ask. Okay. What do Muslims know too? Which prophet wore his wife's underwear? Yeah, that was Muhammad. So that's it. That was a good question. Yeah, Mecca is calling. Does anybody else have any questions? Did I miss any other questions? Anybody have any questions for me? If not, I'm just gonna jump into my closing statement. I appreciate Mustafa for being here. He's a young man. He's got a lot more guts and a lot more courage than most other Muslims who are full grown men who do not have a stutter issue. That are in our comment section a lot. So hats off to you, Mustafa. I really encourage you to think about um, the science aspect of stuff, right? So it's one thing if it makes a mention about this and it's more of a metaphorical sense, right? It's more allegorical. You can make that argument, but the Quran is not necessarily supposed to be taken allegorically. It's supposed to be the eternal speech of Allah, and they're making very blatant scientific claims that are just most obviously are false. So I'm just going to jump into my closing statements because I'm not sure if Mustafa is going to want to do this again, and I want to make sure that you guys aren't being aren't getting the short end of the stick here. So my closing statements are going to be as follows. All right, so I'm even going to time myself, see if I can get this done in 5 minutes. All right, so whatever God creates, Satan counterfeits. 600 years before Islam, there was Jesus. There were his apostles, their writings, and the miraculous Christian movement, counsels, and clarifications. The most important message of all time that everyone in the first century wholly agreed upon: that Jesus lived, Jesus died by crucifixion for the forgiveness of sins, and Jesus rose again. This fact is the most valuable and most meaningful piece of information in the universe. Nothing is more important. No historical account says otherwise about the early Christian movement. This message I'm talking about is called the gospel, or otherwise known as the good news. And this good news is the central focus of the entire Bible. The good news is that Jesus made a way for undeserving sinners to be reunited with God the Father, not by heaping rules upon rules that nobody could possibly uphold, but by coming to earth and living the perfect and holy life that none of us could live, so that he could, through his love, impute his righteousness onto all those who confess that Christ is Lord and the King of Kings, true God from true God. The good news preceded Islam by 600 years. And for anyone to think that a 7th century document written by a man who made innumerable false statements, and they think that he is some sort of reliable historical document to the true life and teachings of Jesus, if you think that, you are insane. It would be like a fake Rolex company claiming that they are the real Rolex watch company. That is just preposterous. What makes Rolex so expensive is the rare and precious materials used to create it. It looks beautiful and is recognized by the world as such. Like any valuable product, other companies come around and they try to replicate it, but they do so at a cheaper cost. So they skip on the most important qualities and valuable things, and they just want to go for what appears to be. Islam is this satanic Folex, otherwise known as a fake Rolex, to the Christianity's real Rolex. Remember, whatever God creates, Satan counterfeits. To the untrained eye, a Folex looks exactly like a Rolex, but it's more appealing for some because it's cheaper. What makes it cheaper is because the most valuable materials are left out. And what makes Islam a satanic counterfeit to Christianity? Well, they make Jesus look almost exactly the same, except for they left out the most important, the most valuable point, that the atonement, which is achieved through the cross, the death, and resurrection of Jesus. Islam looks pious from the outside, like a sheep, but inwardly it's a ravenous wolf that prowls around looking for someone to devour. Islam is a beast that has torn through the world and wrecked the lives of billions of people. They pretend to glorify Jesus in a better way, but they don't preach the real Christ. What is more glorious? A failed Messiah like Islam preaches? Or a crucified Messiah that saved billions of souls from hell and is still alive today, still saving countless souls? A Jesus who conquered death, the grave, and ascended back to the right hand of his Father, back to the glory that he had with him from all eternity. So you see, in all of God's wisdom, he prophesied about Islam 600 years before its wicked conception. And as I've mentioned from Matthew 7:15, Matthew 24:11, 1 Timothy 4:1, 2 Corinthians 11:3 to 4, 1 John 4:1, and 1 John 2:22 to 23. A false prophet will be known when they testify a different Jesus, a different spirit, and a different gospel. Islam fits that description perfectly. And remember, whatever God creates, Satan counterfeits. The prophet of Islam is a counterfeit prophet, an antichrist, and a false prophet. There is no truth in him because he is from his father, the devil, who is a liar from the beginning. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to Mustafa Speaks. I pray that everyone who hears this comes to Christ today. Seek him, knock at his door, and you will find that he is God. He is your Savior. He is the way, the truth, and the life. See you guys.